we've got all of these tribes that are totally healthy, who eat mostly or exclusively meat, and they have none of our chronic diseases. So it's very difficult. It sounds pompous of me, but I've been there, so I know. I've been through all of that study. And do you know what? When I was veggie and vegan, I realized now, why didn't I just look at a cave painting? There's one bloke, one spear, one mammoth, or auroch. There's no salads, there's no broccoli, there's no quinoa, there's none of it. They did not celebrate this stuff. Nobody came back with the fatted turnip and went, yay, I mean, it's in all the holy books. It's in everything. Everything is there about we are designed to eat meat.
And the only way really to figure this out for yourself is to try it. Now, we maintain, and I will bet anything that changing the fuel that your body uses, getting rid of the seed oils, getting rid of the grains, the sugar, and the processed carbs, and ideally all the carbs and then all the plants, is the single most powerful and simplest life hack that you can do.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Phil Escott and Ben Hunt, and we are going to be talking about the carnivore diet. But first, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, a little bio on myself. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen to the show. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. As I said, I have two guests today, Ben Hunt and Phil Escott. They come to us from the UK, and we're going to be talking about the carnivore diet, how they both arrived at this way of eating. Phil, in particular, was a vegetarian, a diehard vegetarian, and when he became ill, the only thing that mitigated any of his issues was becoming a carnivore. He has been deep into vegetarianism, veganism, and the carnivore diet, as well as keto. So he has personally experienced a whole range of dietary protocols, and the carnivore diet has worked the best for him, and he's going to explain that path to discovering that and how it's helped him. Ben was somebody who was into the environment and making the world a better place in as many ways as he could, and that was his path to discovering the carnivore diet, and he's going to explain how that transpired. And we're going to be talking about ancestral history and the ways in which mankind ate way, way back, thousands of years ago, and some of the things that plants do and do not do for us health-wise. So this was a real eye-opener for me. It kind of flipped a lot of my beliefs on their heads. I really had to fight to maintain an open mind on this because I've had so many, I've had so much bias toward plant-based diets, particularly in the last 10 or 15 years. It's been a huge thing. So I know that this may be a topic that makes people a little uncomfortable. It actually was something that I was not very familiar with, so I learned a heck of a lot today. So without further ado, let's get into this. This is Phil Escott and Ben Hunt. Good morning, gentlemen. We are traveling to England today. Different parts, of course, and I guess it's evening for you because it's morning for me. So good evening, and glad you're here, Ben and Phil. And why don't you just start by telling us who you guys are? And I know I met you through John Gusty, so that was a wonderful podcast I did. So and what's your just a brief thing, what you're all about, and then we'll get started on some of these topics.
Okay, Ben's pointing at me, so I'll kick off.
I saw him pointing. Yeah,
it's love having us on, man. It's great. Yeah. Well, my name's Phil Escott, and I sort of started off very interested in all sorts of aspects of consciousness and whatever. And initial explorations were vast quantities of psilocybin mushrooms, that kind of thing, back in the late 70s. And then got into the whole yogi thing, got involved with the TM movement, the transcendental meditation, and moved up to this town here where there's tons of them, although I don't have much to do with it anymore. So I got into the whole yogi thing, and that sucked me into vegetarianism, and I thought that was extremely healthy, and got really into the whole diet and lifestyle thing, studied that a lot, Ayurvedic medicine, plant-based eating, and even wrote a couple of books on it back in the 1990s. And then going on through the 2000s, after owning a gym and getting sort of very big and whatever, but still some whispers to health, I had to start to admit that perhaps what I was doing wasn't really the right thing. And in 2010, I was really crippled with psoriatic arthritis. I'm a drummer as well, so that was no good for me. I couldn't hold some sticks. I certainly couldn't play the bass drum pedals. And I had to throw out everything I knew. But on the way, I sort of went raw vegan, fruitarian, juicing, all of that. That did no good. It just left me with kidney stones and emaciated. And eventually realized that we have, as a species, eaten primarily meat for millennia. And so I had to steel myself and eat a load of meat. And so I started doing that, and I started getting better, and wrote a book called Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, around 2013, 2014. And, I was eating a load of fatty meat and so a few sort of healthy veg. But then in 2015, I went fully carnivore. And that's kind of what I'm known for now. If you put me in YouTube, you won't find much drumming. You'll find a whole load of carnivore interviews. But haven't eaten a vegetable or a plant or anything of any description since then. And things got even better. And, back on the drums and back being able to do all these things. And also still playing in a few bands. And I was even part of that, the Daz band's single, We Are the 99%. You can shove your New World Order up your ass, you can shove your poison vaccines up your ass, all of that kind of thing. And that sort of did very well and was kind of amusing. So toured with them. But really, the thing that I've been doing the past few years is with these red pill guys, and it was Jeremy Ayres, Graham Norbury, John Gusty, and of course Ben here, who put together the words for the books we collaborated on, the Red Pill Revolution and the Red Pill Food Revolution, which is coming out soon. And Ben and I run the Big Fat Challenge together, sort of helping people to rediscover their ancestral roots, if you like, and get back from all that, not just food, but all the sort of disconnects that we've got with all the things that are being thrown upon us these days, environmental and electromagnetic and God knows what. And so there we are. That brings us up to the present day, and working with Ben pretty much now. And here's Ben.
Take it away, Ben.
So I'm Ben Hunt. I count myself fortunate to be Phil's friend. I came to this place by a very different route. I didn't make myself profoundly sick. I was always a mad keen environmentalist. I was completely convinced from like the 90s that the world was on track to burn itself up. And I got fascinated with the idea of taking carbon out of the atmosphere and turning it into soil a few years ago. And that took me to a bunch of conferences and seminars all about regenerative agriculture and farming and how we could feed the world and stuff like that. Now, I guess I've always just really been fascinated on about how humans can live. How can we be healthy, happy, productive, and peaceful on the earth? And I was convinced that was definitely the way to go. And I was going to all these conferences, and I was hearing some weird stuff about the importance of having grazing animals and ruminants on the land. And then also some weird stuff that people were saying about the health importance of the meat and fat from these animals, which I thought was really weird. And I happened to stumble across Phil's Facebook group, 100% Carnivore and Beyond, and discovered that there were people out there, freaks, who eat only meat and fat. And Phil and I got talking because I came from like a background in web design and marketing, and lots of money stuff, and which I didn't really find satisfying, and realized that there was another way, and I've been exploring that since then. And like Phil said, we got together with some other guys. We've written a couple of amazing books, I think, and we really are just convinced that the number one most important message that we can possibly take out into the world is that we've been lied to for our whole lives about how we should fuel our bodies. Because it's like the manufacturer's recommended fuel for this vehicle is fats from animals. And yet what we're told is, and what we've been told specifically very much since the 80s, is that we should have whole grains, we should have heart-healthy vegetable oils and stuff like that. And obesity and chronic disease and stuff are skyrocketing. So that's really the campaign that we want. It all sounds very serious, doesn't it? But that's the campaign that we want to take out into the world. But it's also really, it's kind of funny as well, because there's an incredible amount of bullshit that people have been fed for their whole lives around meat and stuff like that. And we're also at a very critical point, I think, in the life cycle of human civilization, which is that the people who like to think that they make the decisions out there are now telling us that cows are going to suffocate the planet with their burps and their farts, and that we should get rid of all the cows and eat other things. So if we let that happen, then I predict dire consequences for the human race. So there we go. That's my light-hearted intro.
Well, I enjoyed that just as much. Well, there's the sort of super unhealthy foods that people eat, like, the processed stuff that pretty much everyone knows is crap, but they eat it anyway because they like it or it's cheap. Like I'm talking about, like, Doritos and soda pop and stuff that's very obviously crap. Then there is this idea of fruits and vegetables, which I do eat and I enjoy them. And I also eat meats and fish. I do that. I pretty much do everything except, white flours and sugars. I'm not super rigid about anything, but I did try vegetarianism for a little while and I hated it. I didn't feel good. I didn't like it. It didn't work for me. It didn't feel intuitively correct. And correct may not be the right word. It just didn't feel intuitive to me. And I used to do this joke about, well, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat, but I love to kill cattle. And it was a joke that I would do, and people would go, oh, but if you're going to eat meat, you got to be able to kill it. So that's part of it. And I have seen cows being butchered. It's pretty hard to watch, and I'm not sure if there's a way to do it that wasn't putting that zapper bullet in its head, because you could see the fear in its eye. It was really, in whatever it's secreting when it's terrified is going to go into the meat, I would imagine, in some way. So it didn't stop me from eating meat, but it was a pretty wild thing. I just think if you can't at least witness it or do it yourself, then it's a little hypocritical not to, you should be able to do that shit, So that being said, I've interviewed a number of people about meat, which is, the whole vegetarian thing didn't really work for me. I feel better when I eat that type of protein and fat, but there's two types of meat. There's the stuff that's raised in one way that isn't very healthy at all, where these animals are given antibiotics, hormones. They're on these giant farms. It's just, they're not grazing. And then there's what you're talking about was animals that are grazing, in a natural environment and raised in a different way with, grass fed, grass finished, all that kind of stuff. It almost seems like those are two, and I think that is what you're talking about. You're not talking about going to the supermarket and getting that stuff that's in there, because it feels weird just to even look at it. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you guys, so many points you got there, Bob. My head's exploding with wanting to run down all those little rabbit holes, and I'm sure Ben will catch the ones I don't. No, I take your point, but I would like to, straight up off the bat here like to say that we're not dogmatic. We don't have the mentality of a vegan, like everybody needs to do this, or, everybody needs to eat just meat. But people should eat exactly what they want. But there are certain things that we've been really lied to about. Now, all this healthy fruit and veg that we're told to eat. Well, we'd have eaten some fruit, depending on latitude. If you're an Inuit, then you're not going to eat any. You're just going to eat meat. If you down through the latitudes and down as you go further south, there will be some fruit that is seasonal, and that's fine. It's not really that healthy. We were healthy despite it, not because of it, but we never ate much of it. But the fruit and veg in the shops today, none of it existed more than a couple of hundred years ago. And so, why would we need to eat it? If you want to eat it, absolutely fine. But when you look at actual veg, we would have eaten some fruit, we would have eaten some nuts and berries, we'd have eaten some tubers at the times when the hunt failed. But we wouldn't have eaten stalks and leaves. There's no tribes that eat healthy green veg. It's all toxic. There's a friend of ours, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, if anyone wants to look him up. I mean, he looks like a Greek god. He's a neurosurgeon. He's been carnivore with a few slips for pretty much 20 years. And he had an old college professor who sort of turned him onto the business of plant toxins. And he's got a video on YouTube called "Plants Are Trying to Kill You." And it's really eye-opening. I knew about plant toxins for many years, but he's gone really deep into it. There's maybe 136 known carcinogens in an organic Brussels sprout and 60 in the least toxic veg. So if you get one of the people who can clear these and still feel good, that's great. But, when I do consults, I get a lot of very, very sick people come to me, people with really raging autoimmunity, and really they've lost their plant privileges. And sometimes it's very hard to get it across even to them because they think, oh, we need that bit of healthy stuff. But as Anthony says, when somebody's that sick, 95% of the benefits come when you drop the last 5% of the plants. You talk about the hormones and antibiotics and whatever that are injected into meat. It goes on. It's exaggerated by the vegan dogma, but it does go on. However, animals have livers to filter this stuff out. And when people are that sick that they can't afford anything but supermarket meat, I say, well, go for it. Because there's still far fewer toxins than there are in veg. Now, that's not to say we condone factory farming at all, because I think the people who are at the forefront of really not enjoying the idea of factory farming are carnivores, because we want our meat to be the best possible. We want it to live a great life, as a cow or a lamb or whatever. And we want it to live a good life and have a swift death, as swift as possible. But again, this business of the energy, and the fear getting into the meat, I don't know that it's such an issue. This is something that I used to claim as well as a vegan and vegetarian, all the fear in the meat. But when you think of nature and how they're sort of ripped to bits and eaten sort of half alive, and they get a pretty good death with a bolt gun to the head. Now, farm is sort of channeling them through into these horrible abattoirs and whatever is probably a different thing. But if they're killed sort of humanely in the field and just dropped, the cattle around them don't even notice it's happening. So I would say, Ben will go on about much more about the soil, but when these animals are taken out of their grazing lands and put into those CAFOs and whatever, it's a horrible business. It shouldn't be happening. But when you think about it, it happens because of the crops we eat, the crops that destroy all the ecosystems, the crops that destroy the soil, the crops that are then grown and then covered in pesticides to kill more animals. And then the combine harvesters that go in and kill the bigger animals when at harvest time. So there is no compassionate diet. I would say to finish this off and let Ben take off about the whole environmental thing. I would say that beef and lamb, which is pretty much all I eat. I don't even like pork or chicken because they've been kept badly. They've been fed the wrong kind of foods. It's not good meat. I would say grass-fed beef and lamb is the most vegan thing on the menu. Best for everything, really. What have I missed, Ben?
I think that we tend to do is we tend to look at nature because nature's actually done a pretty good job for an awful long time. Has created this amazing multi-layered biodiversity, utterly beautiful, aesthetically beautiful, created rich ecosystems in every corner of creation, So nature does work pretty well. But if you look at the plant kingdom, you look at the animal kingdom, you realize that actually every living thing is driven by the same prime directive, which is to survive long enough to procreate. And the hundreds of thousands of species that we see populating the earth today have done a pretty good job of that. And obviously species come and go. But every animal and every plant wants to survive long enough so that it can continue its genetic print. Now, animals have got some pretty good ways of not getting eaten before they get a chance to do that, or by, playing the game as long as they can. They can fight, they can hide, they can run away. Plants can do none of those things. So plants have actually had millions of years to develop their own methods of self-defense. And they tend to be by growing physical defenses like spines and thorns and furry bits that make them horrible to eat, or more commonly, toxins and anti-nutrients. So plants are masters in chemical warfare. Now, what you tend to find is that you have where anywhere in nature where you have dirt, where you have soil, you will get plants. Right? We'll keep it to the land for now. Right? You'll get plants growing. Lots of different species of plants. You'll get ones that are pioneers that grow quickly, shallow roots, and you'll get all the way up to trees and forests and stuff like that. And remember that no plant wants to be eaten. But wherever you get plants, you will get animals that eat the plants, because that is what nature does. Nature is constantly cycling the sun's energy and nutrients and water and carbon and all these things, and nitrogen. That's just how life works. It's constantly churning all of this stuff. And the more lives that you have living, the more species that you have, the more layers that you have in an ecosystem, the more life there is. And also, whenever you have animals that eat plants, you find animals that eat the animals that eat plants. And that is the same everywhere on land and in the oceans as well, right? So it's not wrong in any way for that to happen. But we need to understand that plants don't want to be eaten either. Now, what you get is you get your herbivores that have developed, they've co-evolved with certain species of plant. So, for example, just take like the koala. The koala eats nothing but the leaves of eucalyptus trees. Now, we can't eat eucalyptus leaves. They'll be toxic to us and they'll taste horrible. But a koala eats nothing else. So you get herbivorous animals that specialize in eating certain plants and processing away the anti-nutrients and the toxins in those particular plants. Now, humans, or really before we became humans, we lost the ability to deal with most of those toxins that we may have encountered in Africa in the plants that our pre-human ancestors ate. And carnivorous animals, they get their nutrition, they get their bodybuilding nutrients, and they get their energy by eating herbivores that have already dealt with the toxins in the plant. So what we find is, and it's really remarkable, it's really mind-blowing once you really start to understand the chemical warfare that plants can do and the damage that it can cause. And it really wrecks our guts. And the high carbs and the grains in particular, really, really just dangerous for us. And we slide into ill health. And that really is the situation that the majority now of the developed world and the developing world have found themselves in. But we've only been doing all this stuff for about 10,000 years at the longest, since the end of the last ice age, right? And because we killed off the megafauna, or the megafauna all died off, the Neanderthals killed the megafauna, and we were running out of stuff to eat. So we started to domesticate plants. And when that happened, the human species actually started to degenerate. We lost about 10% of our stature. We lost about 10% of our brain mass and our brain volume. And now we are facing this absolute pandemic of chronic ill health, obesity, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, the whole lot, metabolic syndrome. The world is getting really, really, really sick in a way that we weren't. If you go back just 100 years, and nobody was that sick. There was a survey done in Boston Massachusetts, the town of Boston, as it was in 1811, where they listed all the causes of death for everybody in that year. So just over 200 years ago. And there was no cancer. There was not one person was listed as having died from a heart attack. Right? And now what are we told? Heart disease is the number one killer. Cancer is going to affect 1 in 2 American men, 1 in 3 American women. Right? Something terrible is afflicting the human. This is really miserable stuff that we're talking about. I was hoping to have a laugh when coming on here, but no, it's the sorry state that we're in. It's like, you know, we say to people that our role as consumers in this society, in the system that we live in now, is to eat the crap that they give us and to get sick so that we can then stand in line to receive the pharmaceutical drugs, and the big money guys win twice. And that's like our civic duty, is to be fat and sick. And the world is stepping up and it's doing its duty. We're getting fat and sick. And the crazy thing is that you don't have to do that. But you know, you have to be open to the possibility that everything that you've been told about how to how to eat a healthy diet, put it that way, is completely upside down. Obesity in the US was relatively manageable until about 1980, when the last dietary guidelines came in, the MyPlate stuff. And since then, it's really just ramped up, and it's climbing and it's climbing. And, you know, in the US, you guys aren't far off now, 50% obesity, which is being overweight to a clinically dangerous degree.
Yeah, you see it more in children than you ever did. I was talking about this with somebody last week, how when I was in elementary school, there was maybe 1 fat kid in the class, maybe 2. Now it's like half the class, pudgy, and, you know, ill health as a child is really a strange thing to witness. But the things you're saying are so, I guess I would love to hear a debate between you guys and the plant-based diet folks, because that must be have you done that? Because that would be
Bob, no, I do it every day. I've got even videos on my channel of you know, well, one particular debate. And the problem we've got with this is, however, and this is me talking as an ex-vegetarian and vegan, you know, I was never a real militant one. I never sort of beat people over the head to do it, but I did used to have these thoughts, and you start to use this sort of NLP kind of stuff, and this sort of programming, like calling it, you know, you don't call it meat, you call it rotting corpses, and you don't call it eggs, you call it chicken periods, and, you know, you don't call it milk, you call it cow pus, and you get all this sort of language that gives you the sort of fake moral high ground. Because as I explained earlier, there is no compassionate diet. You know, anyone who eats crops causes an enormous amount of death. Let's not say causes, but contributes towards it, and keeps the whole system going. And a debate between a plant-based person and a carnivore, it's very difficult, because having come through that whole thing myself and studied diet like crazy with an open mind for 30 years and got it wrong for 30 years. Well, and it's very difficult to communicate with somebody like that who believes that they're right and also has a moral high ground. You know, these animals have all been, this word always gives me trouble, anthropomorphized. There we go, I got it out. You know, with Disney and stuff like that. Sure. And so they love all these animals that have got these lovely long eyelashes, and they've spoken in the films, and, you know, you won't want to kill Bambi and all of this sort of thing. But it's nature. We are facultative carnivores. Our digestive system shows that we are facultative carnivores. We have a gut pH that is more acidic than an obligate carnivore, like a lion. We're sort of adapted to going around and eating sort of semi-rotten kills when you know, before we could hunt. That's what we did. We would sort of do that, and then we'd have tools. We could crack open the skulls and get the brains out. And this is the kind of thing we did. That's our history. There has never been a vegetarian or a vegan culture. And so all of their arguments are based on emotions. And that's awful, because some people have said to me, well, why don't you know, you're expert at the whole carnivore thing. Why don't you debate somebody who is expert in the plant-based world? Well, I've done it, and I am an expert in the plant-based world. I've written books on it, but they get aggressive. it's always you have a conversation with one who is sort of interested enough. A lot of people are lovely people. They eat veganism. They eat vegan diets. They eat vegetarian diets because they've been led down that path. They're very cool people. They mind their own business and whatever. They just haven't done the proper study. But the ones who are vocal enough to engage, whether it's on a podcast or whether it's a live debate, which I've done before, which goes absolutely crazy. Or just conversations on YouTube or social media. It gets crazy. I mean, I've had death threats on my channel. I wish you would have your kids taken away from you. My kids are incredibly healthy. I mean, whereas around the world, there are so many people who are being prosecuted for malnourishing and even killing their kids on vegan diets. And they don't see this, and they have to wake up. They have to get sick enough. I've had so many people send me sort of, well, not always death threats, but always attacks and just horrible things that they say. And very often, a year or 2 years down the line, they'll come to me and they'll go, listen, it's gone wrong. My thyroid's gone. My joints are all rickety. My arse has exploded. Something's happened. And it gets them to say, hey, listen, I need your advice. And healing is not about eating meat. It's not like meat is some kind of superfood. Well, it's our only food, really. It's our only ancestral food. The magic comes when you take the plant toxins out. They do horrendous damage to the body. Probably the worst one is oxalates, and it's in all the leafy greens, most of the leafy greens. I did a load of spinach smoothies when I thought that this was the thing, green juicing. And it always had turmeric in. It always had like whizzed up almonds in. I mean, this is oxalate soup. And then I'd go and have some dark chocolate, which is also full of oxalates. These are probably the worst plant toxin, probably the only one you even need to talk about. I have a podcast called Red Pill Buddhas, and I had Sally Norton on, the last guest, who wrote Toxic Superfoods. Amazing book, totally beautifully researched. And these oxalates are like little glass shards that get in every system of the body, and they take years to dump. I mean, kidney stones, gout is the obvious one. But, I'm still dumping them 12 years after I had my last spinach smoothie. They stay in there a long time, and they come out in waves with all kinds of symptoms. And it's a long-term poisoning. It's not just like, hey, you stop eating that and you're going to be okay. It can have really long-term consequences. It's very difficult to patch up, even on our ancestral diet. And so it's very difficult to talk to a plant-based person about this because it sounds pompous. But, in my group, I think there's about 17,000, I think now, Ben, on my Carnivore group on Facebook. And I see the most educated people I've ever seen because they come through every other diet. Usually the vegans and vegetarians, they've gone from a sad diet, a standard American diet with all the processed foods, and they'll go to less processed, and particularly if they're cutting out seed oils, which Ben mentioned, such a toxin. I mean, they were invented as machine lubricant and soap making additives. So how we think they're heart healthy is a real puzzle. And so they cut those out. They cut the major toxins out. They swap one set of plant toxins for another, and they do have benefits initially, but that's the honeymoon period. And then, all these, well, so many of these carnivores, a lot of people, it's sort of blowing up now. It's becoming much better known with all these docs, promoting it, who look amazing and so much better than the vegan docs. And they go into it, into carnivore now quicker. But most of us who have been doing this for a long time, we've been on every other diet. We promise you, I've tried everything. I got into the whole macrobiotic thing back in 1980, then into the vegetarian thing because it's so spiritual. Never get enlightened if you eat meat. You'll never ascend to 5D if you eat meat. All this nonsense, which is so insulting to our ancestors that all had these beautiful masters and enlightened sort of shamans and whatever. And it's just sort of trashing all of our heritage. So we've got all of these tribes that are totally healthy, who eat mostly or exclusively meat, and they have none of our chronic diseases. So it's very difficult. It sounds pompous of me, but I've been there, so I know. I've been through all of that study. And do you know what? When I was veggie and vegan, I realized now, why didn't I just look at a cave painting? There's one bloke, one spear, one mammoth or auroch. There's no salads. There's no broccoli. There's no quinoa. There's none of it. They did not celebrate this stuff. Nobody came back with the fatted turnip and went, yay, I mean, it's in all the holy books. It's in everything. Everything is there about we are designed to eat meat. So That's a really long-winded, waffly answer and trying to make all the excuses and trying not to sound pompous, but it's so difficult and they usually get very aggressive. So it's a very difficult thing to do. I promise you, Bob, I don't think there's anybody who has had more tolerance for vegans than me. I've got a video probably from like 2017 going, I'm never arguing with a vegan again. I'm not doing it, guys. I'm so sorry. But I do, and you get sucked back in. And it's difficult, Bob. It's very difficult.
Well, it's food. When you think about food, it's when you're a baby, when you're born, and the first connection to the world is your mouth. That's really what it is. You're breastfeeding and just making sounds, and it's the first connection. So it's an emotional thing. Food is probably one of the most emotional things that any human being could do. Is and you see people eating for emotional reasons, overeating for emotional reasons. All kinds of stuff is tied to that. It really is an identity, is what you're talking about. And boy, if you want to rock somebody's identity, now, talk about that. And as you're telling me this is very, I have a similar background to you in a few areas. But I was thinking, like, as you're talking, this is flipping my mind's opinions in ways that I'm kind of fighting it myself. And I wanted you on this show because I'm really interested in it, and I like to think I have an open mind. But as you're talking, I'm going, well, that can't be exactly right, and he's skewing it, and maybe I don't know, because I haven't done what you've done. Although I have to say, blueberry picking is really fun.
And we would have done that. No one's saying that humans have eaten. And in fact, the definition of a carnivore isn't an animal that eats only meat and fat, right? So your ancestors, like Phil was saying earlier, in the late summer, in the autumn, if we came across a tree with nuts on it, if you beat the squirrels, right, then you'd have filled your boots with nuts. If you come across a bush that's heaving with soft fruits like raspberries or blackberries, you'd have gathered as much as you could, and you'd have stuffed your face. You'd have had a big insulin spike. And the great thing is that you'd have stored a load of fat from that. The insulin forces the glucose into your cells that then gets converted to energy or pushed into your fat cells. And you'd have stored fat for the winter. And that was a really, really important survival trait, right? We have lots of fat cells in our bodies, like all carnivores do. We have a large number of small fat cells for rapid access, because we would have been living off our own body fat quite a lot of the time between hunts. Okay, but the great thing, so putting on fat is hugely important to us, and nuts and seeds and fruits would have helped us to do that in order to survive the winter through the ice ages. But the thing is that during that winter, you'd get up every day, you'd go behind the bush and have a pee, and you'd be releasing those toxins that you'd taken on in the summer and autumn gradually throughout the winter. You'd emerge at the end of the winter completely detoxified. The problem now is that we go and we have a half gallon of soda that's sweetened now with high fructose corn syrup, not even sugar, and hyper-processed food. 70% of what Americans eat today is hyper-processed food that's made from basically 5 ingredients: wheat, corn, soy, sugar, and seed oils, right? None of those things are nutritionally complete, or even close to nutritionally complete. I mean, yeah, soy does have some, amino acids and whatever, but bottom line, how are you supposed to get 100% of the nutrition and the bodybuilding nutrients that you need from just 30% of your plate? You're not going to do it, right? So, and apart from anything else, we are now, and your body's really, really good at detoxifying. It's got numerous pathways to detoxify, but the rate at which we are pouring the toxins in, this toxic waste that we've been given and told to eat, our bodies can't cope. And that's why we're all breaking down. We've got the wrong fuel in. It's like putting diesel in a petrol car, in a gasoline car. The engine is going to conk out. The mechanic's going to say, well, what have you done? He said, I'll put diesel in it. Well, it's not a diesel engine. It's going to break. And that's what we're doing. We're all breaking.
The thing that's really kind of blown me away, this is a completely foreign concept to me, even me who explores this stuff, that plants are toxic. I can't, I'm like, what? How is that possible? Why would, I'm not arguing it, but what I'm saying is, my thought is, why would the universe put me on a planet with all these plants and I can't eat them? It just seems odd to me.
But animals do eat them.
They do,
right?
yes,
but there's no animal that can eat all of them.
Right,
and in fact,
correct.
At least 99+% of plant species on Earth are dangerously toxic to humans, right? You can't go and chew, the palm tree behind it. I realize it's a virtual tree, but, you can get, there's a small amount on the inside of a palm tree that you can suck on and get some sugars from. But yeah, you can't, most of these plants out there, some of them are edible, but that doesn't make them food. And they certainly don't provide everything that we need. But that's why you get species that specialize in eating certain plants. And then you get carnivores that come along that lack the ability to strip the toxins out, and they get their nutrition by eating the other animals. And that's the way it's meant to be. That's the way it's always been. Yeah. That is the way that nature works. And our place in that is as those carnivores. And yes, we'd have eaten some fungi, and we'd have eaten some this and that and the other, and we'd have had some emergency food, because we've always retained the ability to extract energy from carbohydrates. So, if we found a yam or something like that and we were hungry, we'd have eaten it. We'd have cooked it and eaten it, right? But that doesn't mean that, this idea that all the plants out there are there for our benefit is just absolute nonsense. There's no animal that can go out there and eat everything.
You said earlier on that it was blowing your mind and you were trying to resist it. And believe me, we all did. That's a healthy way, right? We should question everything that we
should. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we all came to it that way. It was like, this is the most dangerous diet. Everybody knows that fat causes, saturated fat, even though animal fats are not actually saturated for the most part, but saturated fat causes heart disease, meat causes cancer. Everybody knows that, as they say.
Right.
Because there are these absolutely worthless studies that have been done. If you actually look into those studies, and you can see them, you can see people totally pulling them apart now. They're just epidemiological nonsense. And, if you want to see the benefits of it in a study, there was a recent study, the Harvard Carnivore study, if you look it up, and that I've never seen such amazing results in a study on diet than this carnivore thing showed up. And there's not so many confounders. I mean, all these studies on diet that people quote, whether it's dietitians, whether it's vegans or vegetarians, showing that a plant-based diet is better. Well, as to Anthony Chaffee always says, better than what? It's better than maybe a diet that Ben says of seed oils and corn and all that sort of crap, but better than a fully carnivore diet. Nobody's ever done that study until recently. And, a friend of mine said, it really summed it up beautifully, that isn't it funny that when you eat nothing but meat and fat, you cure all of the diseases that are blamed on meat and fat? It's weird. It's so weird. It takes a lot of guts. Most of us came to it in the early days, and I say the early days, I mean, it's all through our ancestry, but recently in the West, since carnivory has exploded, most of us who came to it was like about 8-10 years ago, something like that. It started to become talked about, and we did it as a last resort. We were so desperate. We were so sick, most of us, who came to it. And we had nowhere to go. And we thought, well, there's only one thing left. And we did it. And suddenly all these ailments melted away. And then when you look at it ancestrally, you can see why it happens. I mean, there's a good friend of ours called Dr. Zofia Clements. And she runs Paleomedicina in Hungary. And they just put people on what they call a Paleolithic ketogenic diet, which is very high-fat, meat-based diet, basically. And they see so incredible. They're putting it in actual clinical results now, and putting it, doing their own studies. But beautiful results with things even as complicated as brain tumors and whatever. They're just stopping them in their tracks. And I've got a video on my YouTube channel of my mother's breast cancer reversing on a carnivore diet with a little bit of iodine. And these things are so commonplace to us now. We see these things all the time. Diabetes is a joke illness. if you go carnivore or even keto, carnivore with a little bit of veg or whatever, you will fix diabetes within a couple of months. Those veg become important when you get somebody who is a bit more complicated, who's got an autoimmune condition already. And as they show at Paleo Medicina in Hungary with the PEG tests, with the gut permeability tests, it's very, very difficult, probably impossible, to really heal the gut, which is at the root of all illnesses. And every single medical system has said so since the beginning of time until our ridiculous Rockefeller model. Everything all health is based on gut health. And they're showing that even if you have a little bit of veg every month, once you're that sick, you don't heal the gut. It's very important to get rid of those things. When you heal the gut, in time, if you want to, go back to an ancestral diet. Eat some of these local seasonal fruits and berries. Pluck leafy greens and all the grains and seed oils. Get rid of them for good. Leafy greens are not your friend. They will fill you with toxins. And that's what's hard for people to swallow. But if people can go back to eating sort of some potatoes if they want, although they have glycoalkaloids, they're a nightshade. They can be a problem for joints. They can be a problem in the gut, but some people can take them. And I wish I could, because potatoes 50-50 with butter, is there anything nicer? I mean, they are so nice. If I could have that with my steak, unfortunately, you can't. If you have a steak and a salad, you will get less nutrition than if you had that steak on its own, because there's anti-nutrients in the salad. There's certainly anti-nutrients in the fries done in seed oils. And so people, even when they add meat back in, when they're that sick, they're not getting the nutrients they need. Fully carnivore is the way to go, at least for some time, and then bring it back. It's not an extreme diet. It's just a basic diet. It is the ultimate elimination diet, and that helps people to heal beautifully. And in time, some people get to like 90 days. They've had such incredible results. They don't want to add that stuff back in, so they don't. Like me, I just don't. I don't want to. I'm not interested. I see plants. I just see joint pain. That's all I see. And I know a lot of people have say that they've cured things, they reversed cancer on these sort of juice fasts and things, and yes, they do. But because it's basically a fast, but then the plant toxins build up, the nutritional deficiencies build up, and we see recurrences of it. Loads of people who have come to me have had great results on a plant-based diet, and then down the line things go wrong. It's not our species appropriate diet. And I know loads of people are going to be shouting at the screen now, going, no, it's nonsense. Plants are the best thing. But really actually look into it with an open mind. Take away the emotional side. Realize that there is no compassionate diet. Their tofu salad sandwich has been produced with an enormous amount of wild animal deaths and ruination of the soil. And when you realize that, you can go, okay, well, let's look at this objectively and say, is this guy a lunatic, or does he have some points? And we have some points. Not dogmatic. Eat what you like, but at least be educated, because so many people out there are so sick. And so they go down the plant-based route and they get worse. And that's not fair. People at least need to know the truth. We've been lied to about everything. And you say, the children, it's horrific. They're in schools and they get taught this crap in schools. They get taught how they need all this 5 a day and fiber that causes all the problems it's said to cure. I haven't had any fiber since 2015. I'm not constipated. The Eskimos don't explode because of constipation. They're fine. I always say that my turds now could be on the Bristol Stool Chart Glamour calendar cover. They're so perfect. But back when I was a vegetarian, it was a great phrase that Ben made up for another thing, which is Arsemageddon. It just constantly shitting. The only use I had for McDonald's was to drop in for a McShit when I was desperate in the street. This happened all the time. I don't have this anymore. I have perfect digestion. And we've been lied to so much, and the kids are now having the full brunt of it. There's horrible hormonal disruption. These kids are going through puberty at 6. Something's gone wrong. And at this time, this is my last point on this rant, but this is something that's been occurring to me that I've put together over the last little while. Really, it's become clear in my mind that people say, well, with all these things going on, all the elites fooling us and doing all these evil things at the moment, why are you still talking about diet? Because it's at the root of everything. You look at what Bill Gates is pushing, plant-based diets. He's pushing all this stuff. All the elites are pushing this. They have down the centuries. And this is what we deal with in our new book, The Red Pill Food Revolution. But the kids are now being fed all this crap. The hormones are becoming deranged.
You can define the place of any species in creation as what does it eat and what does it try to avoid being eaten by. We are not ideological. Yes, we look to nature for a guide, but if it turned out that I would be better off eating beans and quinoa, and it was better for my health and better for my energy and better for my testosterone and everything else, then I would get fancy that tattooed right across my forehead, and I would eat beans and quinoa. I'm not tied to any particular thing. The point is that, like Phil said, Phil got to this point by cutting out everything that didn't work. And he was left with beef and lamb, fat, salt and water. This is by painful years of trial and error that people are getting to this point. And for many, it's a last resort.
A lot of what you're saying is, obviously the opposite of what a lot of other people are saying, which intrigues me in the same way it intrigues you. One of the things I've heard about, I'm not sure I believe it, but here's the problem with cattle. Let's say, for example, they take up a lot of land that could be used for plants that are, quote, healthier. You're smiling, Phil, I see. They pollute the water systems because of all the, feces and urine, and it's expensive. There's a big expense, and how are we going to feed? How are we going to feed the planet when that's going on? So, is it less expensive? Is it? But how is it better for the land? How does it damage the water supply? All those kinds of things that I've heard, and so tell me why that is not so. And I don't think it's so in some of those areas, and some I need to be convinced.
No, there's truth. There's truth in all of those things. That's the point. But the problem is that we have, since in the last 200 years, we have taken the efficiency model of the Industrial Revolution and we've applied it to the living world with disastrous consequences. Industrial agriculture is going to kill a large proportion of the human race because we are destroying the soil. And we could talk about that for hours just on its own, but every civilization that has plowed the soil has come to a sputtering end within about 500 years, 500 to 1,000 years. The Roman Empire lasted 500 years. They destroyed their soil. They used to grow most of their olives and grains in North Africa, the region we now call the Sahara Desert, right? The birthplace of agriculture was the Fertile Crescent. This is the eastern side of the Mediterranean, which is now Egypt, Palestine, Israel, Syria, Libya, Iraq. Right? These are not places that you think of as being green and pleasant lands, right? Industrial agriculture destroys the soil. Permaculture is different. You could feed yourself forever on permaculture. That's a different thing. Like you can with regenerative agriculture, where cattle and sheep and whatever are allowed to roam freely on the fields. So, but yeah, you're completely right that when we take the animals and we try to raise them in the most profitable way possible, so we grow a bunch of crops, we feed them the byproducts of crops that people don't want. We put them in these confined animal feeding operations, the CAFOs, where you get this huge concentration of animal waste, which then they pump into massive lagoons, which then creates an environmental problem or leaks into the rivers and what likes. It's not meant to be it's not meant to be there. These animals are meant to be growing in an extensive way, and that poop and the urine is meant to be deposited. We have managed to take nature's ultimate perfect compost, right, and turn it into an environmental problem. That's one of the crowning achievements of the industrial system and the industrial food system. They've managed to make it into a toxin. So, but regarding land use, this is really fascinating because there's something, only about 4% of the land on Earth is actually arable, i.e. plowable. So it's got to be flat enough, it's got to be accessible in order to be able to plow it and grow crops, right? The majority of animals at least in this country. The US is kind of different because you've got that whole Midwest, you've got, a lot of flat areas. But cows and sheep can dwell on hillsides, woodland, like stuff that you're never going to grow crops there. We got sheep on hillsides like that in Wales and Scotland, right? Good luck growing anything in those places. So you can't treat the land like for like. There's a lot more what we call marginal land that can be used to grow animals for food that could never be used for agriculture. So yeah, I mean it's partly true, but the idea about cow burps and farts choking the planet just falls at the first hurdle. You only have to use a bit of common sense to know that, because the bovines have been on the earth, according to scientists, for around 6 million years, right? And the earth, like we say, whenever you get plants, you will get animals that eat the plants. How many? As many as the earth will support, as many as the land will carry. That is nature's way. It is natural law. There's no getting around that. We do not have any more cows and sheep and ruminants in general in terms of biomass than we ever had before. There were so many bison in the US that it blotted out the land all the way to the horizon, right? So, yeah, the environmental stuff is a complete smokescreen.
And Ben, all those bison, they've never held their farts in, right? They didn't hold their farts in. So
they've had 6 million years to choke the world to death, and they haven't managed to do it. So they're not going to do it now.
I'm still laughing about the idea of a caveman with a spear hunting a turnip. That makes me laugh. It's always the bison in those drawings. That's hilarious. All right, I wanted to ask you this. I could go on for many. Well, we can if I got a little bit of time. If you do, I wanted to ask you about babies. When a baby is born and they are breastfed by their mothers, at what point when do you start introducing solid food, and what would that be? I'm curious about that, because it's usually very soft, sauteed vegetables and different types of things like that, baby food. It's so how would somebody who is living this kind of a diet do that with their children?
Well, it's actually one of the easiest things to give to kids. I mean, I'll start with my own experience. I have a 33-year-old boy, and we brought him up vegetarian, and he had some horrific issues, an aneurysmal bone cyst, whole vertebra removed. His neck is still full of titanium. He looks great now. He's muscly, he's fit, he's whatever, but he's still fighting certain issues. Have a 14-year-old daughter who is pretty healthy and kind of okay now, although she's now straying into being old enough to go out and buy her own crap to eat. And I have a little boy who is 8 years old, and he's just 8 years old last Sunday, and he's basically had breast milk and meat and chocolate when he can scrounge it, but he's never eaten a vegetable, and he is so healthy. He's so solid. If the parents sort of pick him up, it's like, God, he's so heavy, but he's not fat. He's got no fat on him. And then I'll sort of pick up one of his friends or something, and they're like, they're fatter than him, but they weigh less. They're sort of, as I'd say, all full of Cocoa Pops and pasta and whatever. That's what they built their bodies on. But his bone density and muscle structure is so solid. I mean, I'm 61 now, and my missus is 50, and we're supposed to have dodgy kids, right? At that age, you're supposed to have dodgy kids. And the older I get, the more I learn about diet and how to bring up kids, the healthier my kids seem to get. And so that's nonsense for a start. But when you actually wean them onto it, people do all kinds of things. I mean, some of the tribes would chew sort of meat up and give it to their babies and whatever. But if you put, the vegans are always saying, well, if you put a rat on the table and an apple, which one's a baby going to go for? Well, of course, we're all sugar addicts. We're designed to go for an apple over a rat, for God's sake. I mean, my boa constrictor eats rats, right? I don't eat rats. I eat something else. But if you put a bit of broccoli on the table and a bit of meat, the baby's going to go for the meat. They don't eat the broccoli. Kids don't like vegetables for a reason. They're wiser than us. They don't want to eat them because they know that they taste revolting unless they're covered in loads of butter. And then, like a shoe covered in butter will taste good, right? But, it's just It's just
we have this reverse psychology thing, don't we? To say that if something, if this green drink that you have makes you go, oh, and shudder, then it must be good for you. And that's not.
It's insane. But if you put a steak, I mean, small bits of meat can sometimes be a problem for a baby because they can choke on it or whatever. But even when they've got gums, you give them a bone with some meat on, they'll chew it for ages. You give them half a steak or something, and they'll chew it, and they'll get a load of nutrients out of it. And we see a lot of people on the carnivore group going, "What should I feed my baby?"
Mm-hmm.
Go, well, what is your baby a human baby? Have you had some sort of alien or something? If it's a human baby, then feed them human food. And this is what we did. This is what we did with our kids. I mean, the whole of the Inuit nation, the Maasai nation, the Sami, what did they feed their kids? Did they give them like Farley's rusks or something? No, it never happened. Did they give them pureed vegetables and fruit? No, because they didn't grow in their area. So they might have chewed them up a bit. They might have, beforehand and given them to the baby. They might have just given them a big hunk to chew on, which you can do, and they will get a load of nutrients out of it. And it's amazing, actually, what a baby can do given time to a load of meat on the bone. It just seems to kind of get sucked and disappears and gets ingested. And that, we are designed for it. We don't need to be frightened of feeding our kids an ancestral diet. They are just little humans. They're cool. They're fine with it.
I have to say, my wife has been doing a lot of bone broth, and she feels amazing. Loves it. It's delicious, by the way.
I tell you what, just wait until she cuts the veg out and has the bone broth with some meat instead. Cut all the vegetables. All I always say is, if somebody doubts this, give it a go. If you're sick, give it a go for 90 days. If you're not sick, give it a go for 30 days. It was funny when I first started that because I mean, even a vegan diet's not going to kill you within 30 days, right? So give it a go. Just try it. One of the things that amazed me when I started my carnivore group, Facebook group, it was about 2017, something like that, I think. And I was just part of a sort of paleo group, and they said, "Oh, I hear you've gone carnivore. Can you help a few of us out with the?" Yeah, okay, And it grew really quickly. But in the early days, the thing that amazed me was the amount of testimonials I was getting, not from the people who were sick, who felt they needed to do it, but from their partners who just, "Oh, I'll do it to support you, so you don't have any temptations in the house. But I'm healthy. I don't know what I'll get out of it." And then I was getting these, all of these things. I'm sleeping better. The last belly fat has gone. I've got no more bloating. Oh, that dodgy knee that I just thought was down to old age, that's gone. My joints are better. Everything. And, digestion's better. I don't fart anymore, all of this sort of thing would start to happen. And this was the testimonials from the people who didn't think they were sick. So all we say is, give it a go. Give it a go for 30 days if you're not sick. Give it a go for 90 days if you are. And it really is astonishing. So bone broth, a lot of people reintroduce that when they've been on a plant-based diet, and it will help. But try cutting the veg out as well, and you'll be amazed.
Wow, this is really mind-blowing for me. This is one of these podcasts where I'm like, whoa, this is, John said you're going to really like these guys. And I do.
Oh, sweet, man. But I mean, I would say people, if they think we're a couple of lunatics, look at the amount of docs who are getting into it now. Particularly, we mentioned Sophia Clements, mentioned Anthony Chafee, looks amazing. Our friend also, Sean Baker. He's like the whole face of the carnivore movement at the moment. He's been on Rogan talking about it, all sorts of things. And, he's 56 and still breaking world records. I sat next to him at a conference that Ben and I were at, for quite some time. And I looked like a toothpick next to him. This guy is a man mountain, and he just gets better and better. And he did as he ate fewer and fewer vegetables. And now he's doing incredible things. There's Ken Berry on YouTube. There's, he's been on my podcast too, and he's got like 2.5 million followers. But if you look at his stuff, he's got like 600, 700 videos on there now. You put on anything, to any ailment, like my head fell off, carnivore diet, whatever, anything that's gone wrong. And he will have some answer about some specific ailment or some specific side of this carnivore business. So if you're sort of scientifically minded and thinking, well, there's just one dude who was into the environment and one guy who got fooled into it because he got fooled into Eastern spirituality and whatever, we're not listening to them. Go listen to Ken Berry. Go listen to the science that they put behind this and the way that they just destroy all of the studies that have gone before. And Ken Berry's beautiful. He wrote a book called The Lies My Doctor Told Me. And he went to a big bestseller in the States, and they didn't like him, and I had him on my podcast and pushed him about this a bit, because his house burned down and his practice within a couple of months. And I think he was getting a bit too close to the bone there. Some suspicious things happen, but he's real brave. And I love him. The first time he said it, it gave me a real lump in my throat from my own healing that I've seen in my own clients and our own sort of people on social media and whatever. And he said, I'm doing what I do now to apologize for the damage I did when I was following the teachings of my medical school upbringing. And I thought that's beautiful. A lot of these people who go against it, they're not being, the vegans go, oh, well, you're being paid by the meat industry. You're a shill for the meat industry. There is no meat industry organized like that. Where's my Ferrari? I get people accusing me of that. I wouldn't be worrying about paying the bills if they were paying me to do this sort of thing. It isn't happening. The profits is in the low cost mass production plant foods that are always at the base of these processed foods. That's where the profit is. That's why we're being told to eat that crap. And so I say, look at the docs now who are coming across to it, and then compare them to the vegan docs, like poor old Dr. Greger, who is wasting away. He's emaciated, and a lot of the vegan docs are. Be warned. Look at the docs that actually follow their own advice and see which ones look amazing and which ones don't, and which ones have the best science and which ones don't. I would say go and look at that. Don't take it from us.
Well, I always say I'm on the side of what works. So I don't, and if it works, then I do it. And I am willing to experiment. I use my body as a test tube for a lot of things, from the psychedelics you were talking about in the early days to different types of foods and, modalities, healing modalities. Some of them work, some of them don't. And, Bob, listen, I'd love to get more into your story. I've got to come onto my podcast as well, because I'd love to hear about all your early days. Sounds like you've had a load of fun and a load of interesting things. Yeah, I have. Well,
and here's a challenge. Try the carnivore thing for a bit. Just mail me if you got any messages. Message Ben. Even join the channel. We'll let you into the tribe and come and chat about it if you want some support. Put you on the Big Fat Challenge with all the info you need. And give it a go, and let's and see what you feel.
Yeah, that would be interesting for me. Maybe my hair will grow back, huh? What do you think? Yeah. Yours didn't.
But no, I didn't have a haircut between 1979 and 2011. It was down to my knees, dreadlocks. It fell out during veganism. But anyway, Ben's busting the face.
I think it is worth us throwing in a disclaimer right now. I think the first thing we would say is don't believe a word that we say. We're just two random yahoos on the internet, okay? What we are saying to your listeners, Bob, is going to go against all the crap that they've been fed for their whole lives. And the only way really to figure this out for yourself is to try it. Now, we maintain, and I will bet anything that changing the fuel that your body uses, getting rid of the seed oils, getting rid of the grains, the sugar, and the processed carbs, and ideally all the carbs and then all the plants, is the single most powerful and simplest life hack that you can do, right? For the majority of people. And you will see amazing results from doing that. And while it is simple, it is not necessarily easy. And that really, again, comes down to the crap. We've been fed crap. A lot of it has gone in through our ears and a lot of it has gone in through our mouths. We are addicted to carbs. We are addicted to sugar. We're addicted to wheat. Wheat and sugar should really be classified as recreational drugs, I think, right? Honestly. But the process of getting over these addictions, particularly when you're living in a family situation with other people who don't want to give up their pizza and their Pringles and all that kind of stuff, it's not that easy. And you do have to go through a process of getting over the withdrawal from sugar and wheat in particular. There are also some warnings to do with, like, if you suddenly cut out all the veg, then, like Phil was talking about the oxalates earlier, you can experience some symptoms when your body starts to go, oh, okay, I'm clear of oxalates, right? any cells that have got any oxalates, you can dump them all into the bloodstream now, and then that can cause problems of its own. So you need to manage it in a careful way, which is why we offer the Big Fat Challenge to help to coach people through that process for a period of 3 months. And then at the end of 3 months, you decide. That's what we're saying to people. Give it 90 days of your life, right? But this is the most effective thing that you can do to take back control of your health, right? And opt out of the predestined, long, painful slide into metabolic disorder and ill health and a miserable old age that has been set out for you. Yes, it is your civic duty. We understand that. Yes, it's great for the economy. It's great for the profits of the corporations, but that doesn't mean that you have to do it.
Guys, unbelievable. Blew me away today. I did not know what was going to happen, and I'm glad everything that happened. It was great. Let's tell the folks how they can further their path to experimenting with this and seeing if it works, if you're on the side of what works and you're willing to try 90 days, and how you get a hold of these guys. Phil, why don't you go first, and then Ben, you can go after that.
Get over to the redpillrevolution.com and check out our books and loads of all sorts of content. I've got my podcast on there as well, the Red Pill Buddhas podcast, and going into a lot of these things. The Big Fat Challenge that we're on about is thebigfatchallenge.com. I just, Ben's explained it and I'll let him explain it more, but I'd just like to say that we want to get this out to so many people and make it available to so many people. But I'm going to let Ben go through all the details of that and the freebies and everything you get with it. But we've got it on a pay what you can afford basis. And we just want enough people to sign up and experience this. We love these healing stories. I mean, we all like to pay the bills, but I tell you what, when I started doing this coaching, you can get me for consults if you want. If anyone's listening to this with autoimmunity, you can get me at pureactivity.net for consultations. But honestly, the rewards when you see these incredible sort of, docs have been telling them for decades they'll never get over this, and then you see all these beautiful improvements. It's wonderful. It really is. And it's not us doing it. It's just ancestral wisdom. We haven't discovered anything new. I said that my mother's cancer has reversed. We've seen reversals like this, but it's not us doing it. It's the body has all the systems. We're not gurus in this way. It's just to lead people to take away the things that are causing it, and the body does everything. So that's what we try to do with the Big Fat Challenge. It's not just about diet. It's about, light, grounding, all these things. So many areas we could get into: emotional balancing, the spiritual side of it, the environmental side. All of these things are contained in there. And so, Ben, why don't you explain more about the challenge?
It's a 90-day challenge, 13 weeks, and we break it down into steps where it's like Phil said, it's about getting out of your own bloody way, right? So we cut things out, mainly 1 week each week. But in addition, I have to say that the Red Pill Food Revolution is still not yet out on, you can't buy it anywhere, but we have, you can get it in PDF form and in audiobook form as well if you join the Big Fat Challenge, because we've recorded that. And the reason why we're doing this, the reason why we are on here today with you, Bob, is that the process of writing that book was so profound for me and Phil and for our co-authors that for us it really just set out as like the light shone down. That's what we have to do. We have to get this message out because it's really, really important for people. So yeah, you get that. You get a bunch of other books as well that Phil and I have written. So you can get the copy of Phil's Arthritis, the best thing that ever happened to me. Something that I've written about simple living as well as another one about starting your own business. We throw all of that in there. You get all the calls, all the recordings of the calls from the first 90 days that we did with our pilot group as well. But yeah, it really is great. And, just pay what you can comfortably afford to do it. There's several options on there. So, but you have to go along to www.thebigfatchallenge.com. Remember to put in the www on the front, and hopefully we'll see you on there.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being on the show. It was really really an eye-opener, and I really appreciate your time. A two for one, makes it even more exciting. So thanks so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Bob.
Bob.
Thank you.
It's been a privilege.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. I want to thank Ben Hunt and Phil Escott one more time for coming on the show. I will have some links in the description. Have a fantastic day. Bye.